cup of coffee, sit back and listen to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life features stories to inspire and motivate you. Live your best life now. Listen, learn, think, and decide. Change your attitude, change your life. Visit cyacyl.com.
Welcome to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in. Mental illnesses are medical conditions that often result in a diminished capacity for coping with the ordinary demands of life. They can disrupt a person's thinking, feeling, mood, ability to relate to others, and daily functioning. Mental illnesses can affect persons of any age, race, religion, or income. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, 1 in 4 adults, or about 57 million Americans, experience a mental health disorder in a given year, and the U.S. Surgeon General reports that 10% of children and adolescents in the U.S. suffer from serious emotional and mental disorders that cause significant functional impairment in their day-to-day lives at home, in school, and with peers. Mental illnesses are serious conditions, and they're not related to a person's character or intelligence. The good news about mental illness is that with the proper help, recovery is possible. Today's guest, Tom Davis, has experienced the impact of mental illness on his family, generation after generation. Tom is the author of the book, A Legacy of Madness, Recovering My Family from Generations of Mental Illness. He's here today to offer an intensely personal, brutally honest, and captivating account of what it was like to grow up in a family where normal was anything but normal. Tom is an award-winning journalist who has emerged as a leading authority in covering mental health issues. He was a recipient of the Rosalind Carter Mental Health Journalism Fellowship, and he writes a blog called Coping with Life, which deals with life, family, and mental health issues. Welcome, Tom. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Tom, in the introduction, I mentioned some pretty staggering statistics. 1 in 4 adults, or approximately 57 million Americans, experience a mental health disorder in a given year, and 10% are children and adolescents. What do you think is going on in our society, or do you think it's just a case that perhaps more people are getting diagnosed?
I think more people are getting diagnosed, and actually I would argue that that number is too low. I would say that I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I feel that based on the fact that I've written and explored this topic in so many different ways and in so many different depths, that I feel that I've developed more than a common sense knowledge of what's out there. And the anecdotal evidence is pretty clear that, I think many people have some sort of an issue. They have some sort of an issue with what, is going on within their own environment, whether it's some sort of a stimuli, whether it's some sort of a personal stress they're going through. Sometimes it's very reactive to events in their life. I just saw the movie Silver Linings Playbook. I would say that's probably, if not the most realistic portrayal of mental illness, maybe one of the most realistic. And I especially thought that the character played by the character Pat, the main character, was actually a very realistic depiction of bipolar disorder. I thought it was treated in a way that was handled gently, and I thought it was handled realistically. And I felt the interesting thing about it was that he was not the only person who had some sort of mental illness in the movie. I think the movie was really trying to project the message that we all have something, perhaps. Maybe not everybody, but we all have something. There's no real normal out there, perhaps, that we all have some sort of issue, whether it's depicted in the movie, the father's remote controls were pointing in the right direction toward the television set, or, whether like a book like Farewell to Arms is something that can drive you crazy enough that you throw it out the window, or whatever. Or even other people obsess about the way food is being cooked. I think that everybody has some sort of issue, some sort of tick that maybe makes them and differentiates them to somebody else.
A lesson of that movie is also the power of family in being a vital force for transformation. And we'll talk more about the role of the family later on. But I think, as you also alluded to, with the father's character, Robert De Niro, it is a generational issue unless changes are made somewhere along the generational line.
Exactly. I think, and what you have essentially is some sort of, you have these generations that go through time and everything, and I think they're undiagnosed. I feel as though if these surveys, while they probably underrate what's going on right now, if they had done the same surveys back then, perhaps they would have been even lower, or maybe they did do the same surveys, but I think a lot of people just didn't want to be, a lot of people weren't diagnosed because they just didn't go to the doctor to be diagnosed. And in a particular case in the movie, you had basically people living within a comfort zone. You had the Robert De Niro character who played the father in there, who kind of lived in his own comfort zone, and his wife was somebody who kind of protected that comfort zone. You have people who actually live through mental illness and survive every day without going through the issues that my mother went through, because they are pretty well protected. And of course, you have different cases at different levels of severity. But again, if you have like somebody who helps protect you, or maybe even helps enable you, and can help you survive, you can do that. You can do it without medication. The environment matters.
So, Tom, let's talk a little bit about your family and your story. You grew up surrounded by mental illness. What was going on within the dynamics of your family?
Well, we had like a very similar comfort zone. But it was more of an enabling comfort zone. We had my mother, who was essentially she was the matriarch of the family, but I use that term loosely because she basically what she did and how she acted basically controlled what was happening at that moment for the family, control what was going to happen that week. We did everything we could to basically kind of surround around her without really talking about it out loud, without really even like addressing the issues that were apparent. We just tried to survive. We didn't try to help or cure or manage or anything, which I think to our detriment. I think what we would try to deal with was just try to survive with my mother and her issues. And her issues were severe obsessive compulsive disorder. She washed her hands until they were red and flaky, and that the skin was almost like it was ready to be scratched and peeled off her hands. She obsessed about things about the bathroom. She obsessed over my father and his actions. She obsessed about food. She obsessed about things she ate. This became like our normal. This was our new normal. But it did cause a lot of stress. It caused a lot of stress for my father, who was the caretaker. It caused a lot of stress for like anybody around us. It caused stress for the children. And so we grew up with like a very jaded sensibility of things. And we grew up with a lot of like stark memories, and we had to deal with those stark memories, and it affected the way we dealt with other people and we socialized with other people. And, it was at times very traumatic.
Tom, your mother was also the child of a parent that had mental illness, and it goes down a few generations before her.
That's right. Yeah, that the idea with the book, I originally actually called this book Generations, and my idea was that I was going to write the roots of my generation. I was going to write the roots of a generation of mental illness. What I did was I went to graduate school a few years back at Columbia University, took a class with a very well-known and prominent instructor by the name of Sam Friedman, who writes for the New York Times. And so it was actually a very tough class to get into. It was called book writing, and I proposed my idea, and I basically had like some sort of general idea that my family had these kind of generations of mental illness, but I wasn't really sure. But before I even researched the idea, he approved the idea, and then I went out, and what I did was I found out that and confirmed that at least 5 generations of my family have had some sort of serious mental illness, and at least 4 of those generations ended in self-destruction. So what I found out was that the people died through typically like suicide or something akin to suicide. And what I did was I found out that those people were actually, had to deal with those issues and really couldn't deal with those issues. So the book deals with that, kind of follows through that basically that chronology of people basically going through mental illness and failing through mental illness. And my book, what it talks about is the current generation and how this is trying to survive and cope through that.
So, Tom, what did you experience in your life?
Well, my issue was that we grew up thinking that we had a family that was actually going to survive and was going to be a typical American family, as a cliche. But we thought that, as we got older and everything, we saw that these issues were maybe like a little bit more than we could handle. We went through this whole situation where we were trying to mature through our teenage years and trying to deal with our own issues that were very similar. And what happened with me was that mental illness manifests itself in different ways. And particular disorders also manifest themselves in different ways. Mine manifested in a way that was essentially eating disorders. I obsessed over everything I ate. And it really began like when I was in high school. It was something that I really had a hard time actually like dealing with, because it was something I thought that men couldn't have, was eating disorders. It just seemed to be so totally the antithesis of what men go through. And I went through a period in high school I wouldn't eat at all. I would give all my food to the dog. The dog would roam the table, under the table, and I give the food to the dog. My mother used to obsess over the food, so it was kind of a double whammy. She used to really obsess over the hamburgers, and she used to think that maybe the germs from the food would come out into our bodies if it wasn't cooked like a brick. So I used to feed that food to the dogs. And then that kind of continued into college years. And then when I got into college, I went through a period where I lost about 60 pounds within a matter of months. and I dropped down. I'm 6'2". I dropped down to about 129 pounds. So that's basically how that manifested itself. And it's an issue I've had to basically deal with, and it's been lingering for a long time. But it's something that I've kind of dealt with through therapy and various forms of it and everything. So that was how it really kind of affected me mostly. But I also had other. My mother was scared to death of germs. She was Howard Hughes, essentially a living embodiment of the legacy of. And what I did was I ended up also kind of living a Howard Hughes lifestyle myself, only it manifested in a different way. So.
Tom, we're going to take a break for this week's Good Life Tips. Stay with us for information to help you make the positive life changes that we talk about in this show. When we return, I will continue my discussion with Tom Davis. Welcome back to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman, and our guest today is Tom Davis, author of the book, A Legacy of Madness, Recovering My Family from Generations of Mental Illness. Tom, before break, we were talking about your battle with bulimia. And at this point in your life, where are you in your recovery?
I would say that, I've been able to manage it through continued therapy, some of the medication, I have to admit. I know that's like a taboo word for some people, and you talked about the movie Silver Linings Playbook, and they effectively portray how that can be an issue for people and how they kind of go certain body changes, especially if their mental illness involves some sort of self-control issues. But take some a little bit of Lexapro and a little bit of clonazepam every day. Basically, we kind of help reduce these stress issues that involve obsessions over certain things, particularly eating. But I got to tell you, when you go through mental illness, there's no easy cure. That's something that I always try to tell people. There's nothing that really out there where you take a pill and just something goes away. It's basically the managing, learning how to manage it. And what happens is that medication becomes a part of that. It becomes a way to help facilitate that management. A lot of people, unfortunately, don't cope well with mental illness because they feel medication that it'll actually hurt them. And the other one is that it'll actually cure them. Well, it doesn't either one of those things. But you have to find the right medication for you, just like you have to find the kind of right treatment and therapy for yourself. And that's what I've basically done. It's helped me reach some sort of point of stability where I can actually function normally and well.
Tom, earlier we were talking about the movie Silver Linings Playbook and the role of the family in support and recovery. What should someone who has a friend or a loved one that they believe is dealing with some type of a serious issue, what should that person do in order to help the person receive the help that he or she needs?
Talk to somebody. I mean, that was something that we dealt with our entire lives. I mean, as children and on up. I didn't talk to my father about my mother's mental health situation until I was 31 years old. That was something that was never talked about. I heard my father every now and then made some comments to my sister, who was 7 years older than me, but never was a taboo subject, and I thought that was to our own detriment. I think that we probably could have found ways to actually deal with my mother's mental health issues earlier. She was very stubborn and obstinate about things. She probably really didn't want to be helped, but I think that she got to a point where she was in such a decrepit physical condition, and she was in an even mental condition that she was like almost beyond help. You never can be beyond help, but she was in a way, and I felt that maybe, one thing that happens is that people don't realize that the mental health issues goes right alongside and hand in hand when you're dealing with somebody's physical illnesses. It goes right in hand with that. My mother went through a crippling knee injury when she was in her mid to late 40s, and she never really fully recovered from that, and she never really had it even fixed or addressed in a way that could have been fixed and addressed in an appropriate way. And medication, the fact that she refused to take medication, the fact that she refused to have it addressed, the fact that she was going through these mental health issues prevented her, I think, from actually really addressing her own physical issues. If we had found a way to maybe talk to her about that, or maybe get her to somebody to talk to, maybe she could have found that way when she was younger and healthier and in a place where she was more correctable and more self-aware and she could have actually done something about herself, but it was too late.
So it's really important, Tom, that we don't give up on our loved ones, that we keep fighting for that person when that person can't fight for him or herself.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and you have to find. It also depends on the case too. I mean, some people become part of the problem when they try too hard to help somebody or something. They what they really need to do is when they talk to somebody, it's not just the person who's going through mental health issues that has to talk to somebody. It's the people who do the caregiving that talk to people. They have to be armed with the right tools. They have to They have to know who to talk to. They have to know what to say. They don't have to know how to deal. Otherwise, they become part of the problem.
The recent tragedies that have been taking place, the Newtown shooting and all these other mass shootings that are happening, they're starting to bring to light once again the issue of mental illness. What do you think we as a society need to do in order to change the perception, get people the help that they need, and remove the stigma that's attached to a mental illness? Again,
I know it's a cliche, but talking about it, I mean, what really bugged me about the coverage of the Newtown shooting was that now it's suddenly that media, I actually teach media ethics at Rutgers University, and one of the things I teach is that how the media covers things and the whole news cycle. And now it seems like it's become almost like too convenient of an excuse to say that mental health is like the only reason or the biggest reason for why this happened in Newtown. This is something that's actually not new. We had these issues in Columbine. We had these issues. We trace this back to like many of the shootings that have happened before, many of the mass shootings or incidents that have happened before. Mental health has been an issue. Why is it suddenly an issue now? Now that we recognize it as an issue, now what we need to do is to keep it in the dialogue. We now what I'm worried about is that now that we're talking about gun legislation and what to do about that, we're going to lose the focus on the mental health aspect of it. We should maintain a laser focus on the gun aspect of it. We need to continue to address how we deal with mental health issues. And one of the ways we talk about mental health issues is how it impacts us. And if we can talk about how it impacts us, we can basically kind of bring up these case examples and prove to each other how this impacts us in so many different ways. The decisions people make that change our lives. Whether it's a mass shooting or whether it's some mayor who runs a town or something like that, and maybe he's or she's going through some sort of personal issues themselves, and they make certain decisions that could be harmful or impact us in a way, or maybe a relative that is making decisions that need to be addressed from a mental health standpoint, and we need to keep this stuff in the dialogue. And once the legislators and the lawmakers understand that, then maybe they'll start recognizing that we need to actually start pumping more money into programs, into psychiatric hospitals, into non-psychiatric hospitals like in-between care that will address these issues instead of right now. What we have a situation right now, it's either you get thrown into the mental hospital or you get nothing. And unless you make a personal choice to get help, you really get nothing. There's really no intervention out there unless you're basically a harm to yourself or other people, or unless you do it voluntarily.
I think, Tom, you make some excellent points, because when you mentioned Columbine, you're right. When that happened many years ago, it was at the forefront, and then we forget. And then something else happens, and then we forget. And now it's happening again, and you're absolutely right. We need to keep the dialogue open. Changes do need to be made. Money needs to be pumped in. And I think a lot of times it does come down to people wanting to get care, but they simply can't afford it. If you don't have health insurance or you don't have coverage, who can afford $250 an hour for counseling and therapy? So you're right. Either something really does need to be done. It's a prevalent problem. And I hope that the fact that you've written this book, and I hope that the fact that people like you are brave enough to come out and just lay the cards on the table, put your life out there, and be an example for others. I just hope that makes a difference and people can start to think in the way that's going to help to enact some social change.
I agree. I mean, that's all part of my book. That's the big impetus for it, is to talk, because we never did before.
If you or anyone you know and love is dealing with a mental health issue, pick up a copy of A Legacy of Madness, Recovering My Family from Generations of Mental Illness. According to former New Jersey Governor Richard Cody, who is nationally known for championing mental health issues, this is a book from the heart, and for any family with somebody who has a mental illness, this is a must-read. Tom, if our listeners would like more information about you and your work, where can they go?
At my website, which is at tom-davis.net, and I also have my book at legacyofmadness.com.
And as always, our listeners can visit our website, cyacyl.com. That stands for Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. While on our site, listen to past shows as podcasts, read the digital magazine, sign up for our mailing list, take part in the book club, and be sure to follow the show on Facebook and Twitter. Tom, thanks again for spending time with us and for sharing your story and for shedding light on what it's like to live with mental illness. Hopefully, our listeners will be touched by your story and they'll seek out the help that can save their life. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Like I said, I mean, the book is basically to try to get things out there, to basically give the idea that, it's really not taboo to talk about it. Much like, again, to use Silver Linings Playbook as an example, I believe is the producer who has a son who's bipolar. He felt that using that book that was written about Silver Linings playbook of training or a movie was a vehicle for him to basically provide that sort of an outlet and get people to understand that this is something that's prevalent and something that's not taboo and something that we can help people become functional again if we just talk about it.
This is Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in.